Wonderful. And with that, a very warm welcome to everyone. Looks like we have people from across the globe. So thanks to those who are already here with us and said hello in the chat. Those of you just drizzling in, feel free to still use the chat throughout the session. Let us know who you are, what brings you here today. And as we go through the session, maybe also what questions you have. So let me briefly, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Melanie. I'll be moderating the session today, especially once we get to the panel piece of it. So I am an AL master trainer, and as you know, today's panel is going to be focused on the accelerated learning methodology that we've been bringing to different markets across the world for quite some time. But I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details right now for that. Not to bore you, but to share more interesting details. I have my two panelists, Tanya and Darwin, with me, who are going to be sharing a lot about their journey, why they chose to kind of go on the accelerated learning journey, what has it kind of taught them, how are they using the accelerated learning methodology, activities, principles in their everyday work. So there'll be a little bit of a piece where they present a little bit of their journey, and then we'll have a more interactive panel discussion. And at any moment, we are more than happy to kind of incorporate your questions into the session as well. So please don't be shy. Whatever questions you have, put them into the chat, or even feel free to just raise your hand virtually so I can give you the words and you can actually share your question over the audio with the panelists. But yeah, you might be wondering, who are those panelists? Yeah, you see them right now. You can read their names probably, but who are they? So maybe very briefly, Darwin and Tanya, one after the other, tell us a little bit more about who you are, where you come from, and maybe just straight away connected to the topic today of accelerated learning. Um, Feel free, I'm just going to put you a little bit on the spot, but if you had to maybe pick a word or a symbol or even an object, anything, yeah, to kind of describe AL, what would that be for you?
Oh, wow, brilliant.
You want to go first,
Yeah,
Darwin?
yeah, okay. Man first in this instance.
Exactly, always. I can't say ladies first. I feel bad saying that as a lady myself. So men first, absolutely.
No, for me, I think, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm Darwin Antipolo. I'm actually based in Manila now. I toggle Singapore and Manila, but I'm in fact really in Antipolo City. And if you've noticed, my surname is Antipolo, and that's true, Antipolo City in the Philippines. Um, I am a founder and principal consultant of a business strategy and design agency based out of Singapore. And I think I just want to latch on to what Melanie's prompt is in terms of like equating AL into an object or something. But you know what? When I was rifling through my materials, I felt AL was like coming home. So AL for me is like coming home. And so maybe we can dive deep into what that means for me and maybe for you also that is probably encountering AL for the first time or is curious in what is this home that Darwin is talking about. So that's that for me as an intro.
Well, you definitely got me
Tanya.
curious. I never thought
Yeah.
about describing AL as coming home, but
Yeah.
definitely now curious to know more about what you mean by that. But first, Tanya, tell me more about who you are, or tell us more about who you are.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Darwin. So I'm Tanya. I live in Mauritius. I'm Mauritian. I have been in a past life working in the finance industry, and 2 years ago, I started a new career, being a trainer and facilitator, and also a coach for companies here in Mauritius. I've got several clients, and I also work with 2 training institutes on topics such as customer service, leadership, time management, etc.
Wonderful.
And if I had to say something that triggers me about AL, it's letting my inner child express itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, coming home, the child. So it looks like all kind of very, very family oriented. Wonderful, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. So, before we kind of go a little bit into the panel discussion, I think what might be very useful for those of you who are not so familiar with accelerated learning, let me actually just show you one very quick thing from my side, so that when Darwin and Tanya are afterwards sharing a little bit more about their journey, hopefully that will help you put that a little bit into perspective. So let me actually just very briefly pull this up. And just share with you a couple of words about what accelerated learning really is. So, accelerated learning is basically a design method, a facilitation method, with the objective to create learning experiences that are highly engaging, relevant, interactive, very learner centric, and create impact. So it's all based on how we best learn and how can we, especially in the training room, create an environment where we support our learners in discovering and making sense of new knowledge and skills in such a way that it really sticks afterwards. And for that, accelerated learning kind of makes use of 8 so-called principles. And don't worry, I'm not going to bore you in detail about them. I'm happy to share that with you. But I just want you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, because I'm pretty sure Darwin and Tanya might be referring to that. But basically, AL kind of has these 8 principles and pillars that we kind of go by or refer as a guiding post when designing and facilitating learning experiences. What I really love, and of course, afterwards, I'm curious to hear from you, Darwin and Tanya, is that no matter who I train and what I train on, these principles apply. I mean, I've worked with clients across the globe in different industries, be it technical training, functional training, leadership training, all kinds of different topics. It doesn't matter what I train and teach. AL is really about how do I get that content across in such a way that it's fun and engaging and relevant in the way people discover it. It's easy for them to actually digest it and make sense of it, and prepares them to apply it afterwards back on the job. So that, just for those of you kind of wondering a little bit, that's kind of a little bit of a backdrop. So AL, a very learner-centric, activity-driven design methodology with the objective to, I guess, very loosely said, take any content and package it in a meaningful, impactful way so that it creates a rich learning experience. But enough from my side. It is about you. So again, men first. Darwin, why don't you take us a little bit on your journey of AL, how you're using it, and then we'll kind of see what question that might trigger. Go to Tanya before we get into a more interactive panel discussion.
Yes, of course. Getting the baton from you and chatting away. And I'm just sharing a few slides in my own screen. So just maybe view me in a speaker mode if you wanted to see what I'm showing. So I'm just going to go through. But I think to begin, let me just put in context what I mentioned a while ago. So where I am right now, this is a 5-year-old agency, a business strategy and design agency. The focus at the beginning is service design. I've folded in corporate foresight, if you are familiar with futures thinking, so scenario planning and all. So those are the spectrum of the services that I offer in PXD Labs. And I use serious play and visual thinking as a sort of like a methodology. And we might, this might trigger some curiosity in using serious play and visual thinking. But essentially, how I introduce myself, I come in as a facilitator, a designer, and a strategist. But the history of Darwin and Tipolo is 20 years in corporate as a digital marketer and a technologist. So, but almost always I come in as a facilitator working with teams and small and medium enterprises across the ASEAN market. And so sort of like that's the focus. And again, referencing the things that I'm doing specifically in the domain on service design and strategic foresight. I guess the sharing today that I wanted to do for this panel is the before and after accelerated learning. So ALB and ALA. So we had I mentioned a while ago about accelerated learning, and I think during the course of the sharing, you'll probably see me and hear me show to you and hear me about my experience with accelerated learning before and of course after. But again, just referencing a while ago, because this was this provocation coming from Melanie a while ago, how I created, because I was like, when I was like reading this material last night, and the only thing that like what was resonating with me with accelerated learning is that when I discovered accelerated learning, and it's really fairly recent based on the things that I've been doing right now, it's like it's coming home. Home, for me in this instance, the metaphor of home is like, it seems familiar. It seems I'm comfortable with it. It's like that aha moment of, hey, this is nice. This is I can live with this. I can use this. I can feel comfortable with this. And it does the discovery of accelerated learning. And at the same time, now seeing that this is a new home, that I can build a new practice around accelerated learning and the things that I'm doing with service design and corporate foresight. So I guess I just wanted to pick up a few, like 3 key points on the before and after. I think for many of us in the call or like listening this in playback is that when we're developing our workshop, maybe Session Lab is a fairly common tool or a platform that you probably use or encounter. Excel, of course, definitely in Sheets. And it just prompts you at the tail end of the thinking that you're developing, and you're already designing and developing the workshop or the learning experience, that you go through the time boxing what it is and how it is that you want to deliver. I love this tool, but when I discovered accelerated learning, this became like on the side, and I'm highlighting in this screen that you're seeing right now the design blueprint that is based on the principles, the roll up of accelerated learning. And I think we may probably have to spend a little bit more time on this one and what is in there, and why I think this one is one of those defining moments when I saw this and I was experiencing using this, and was like, wow, if I had this in this, then it's this. And now that I'm constantly using it as a means of repurposing some of the learning workshops that I have developed, and primarily even now that whilst I'm even thinking new programs to develop, this is now my default. So normally it comes in the tail end, but now I'm using it at the very beginning. So that's life. That's a defining moment for this very young practice that I have, especially when it involves developing workshops and all. Another key thing is that you're seeing in the screen PowerPoint in this group of people, that number signifies how I was normally like defining or designing learning experiences. I'm so particular about the PowerPoint, and like, am I getting the images or the videos right? Will it use? How can I use this? And most of the time, 55% of the time, I'm presenting using this PowerPoint, and 45% of the design, I would probably just be thinking about the activity in support of the topic that we probably are exploring or the team's exploring. And there's a significant shift in the way I think right now. And I'll probably hazard you a guess in the chat. For example, what do you think it would be the split right now between the PowerPoint, the presentation, and the activities once you see some of the examples that I am going to show you? So where before, like probably this 3-day leaders retreat that I developed prior to accelerated learning, it will probably series of presentation, and like after a topic, I'll do this. But in this instance, when I was doing this leaders retreat, the activity was pivotal to the the objective or the goal of that subsession within the retreat. So it's now activity has not now become like oh, by the way, I need an activity to do that. In fact, you can even see this when you attend some of my virtual session right now. Offshoot of the COVID, I'm still doing a lot of virtual sessions, and you can see that the split between the PowerPoint, as you can see, just a sampling. You can see some of the slides there are lesser now, and more of the activity, even in a virtual session. And lastly, I think I'm gonna pull from the one of the principle, and I really really love this when I encountered this, and it says there an effective program appeals to all senses, and so that has been driving some of the sub activities within an experience that I'm trying to design, the learning experience that I'm trying to design, to activate all these senses, because normally it's like the usual, the sage in the stage normally, and you just visually and your auditory, you're trying to teach or engage individuals. But with accelerated learning, I think this one was instrumental to a lot of the things that I've been changing. For example, even a very simple icebreaker that would have been like, I just open a book and say, hey, this one is interesting. Let me use this as an icebreaker. But now, even the way I design the icebreaker, it's very intentional. And you look at it in terms of what are the senses that are being activated when I do this. Like, for example, this one, a group of educators, instead of just have a simple icebreaker, as being prompted by that principle, I design a visual card based on their target audience before we even go into the discussion proper, and it just made them stand, talk about it, and there's some activities that are going around, and you're primarily on the get-go already active, and that amps up the energy in the room. But at the same time, even at that onset, they were like, oh, why are we talking about the people that are not in the room? And that also starts the conversation proper with that one. Even the way now I probably design the space, it's very critical for me right now. I'm also a Lego series play facilitator, and that comes with the territory that you have colorful bricks, but outside of the bricks, you can see some of the materials that I have there with students. So I'm like a walking laboratory with items that they can use when they create their prototype. And even at the onset, like the last image that you're seeing there on the right, I was encouraging a group of senior executives, like, what is your personality going into this experience? So it brings down that high hurdle of like, oh, we're going to talk about serious stuff, psychological safety and what, but maybe it shouldn't be. And so even that, I think, has already affected based on how I experience accelerated learning at the beginning. And I'm just going to highlight those three, and maybe we can pick some of the items that interest you and bring me other ways. But essentially, that's just my story so far, and I'm really looking forward in terms of how I grow the practice using accelerated learning at the very core of the things that I use in terms of designing and developing and even facilitating conversation. So that's me, Melanie.
Thank you so much, Darwin. And before we'll give Tanya a moment, I just want to quickly jump in with a question that got triggered in your last kind of slide, because it's a concern I hear from a lot of people when running accelerated learning certification programs. This is childish. This is not going to work with senior leaders. And I mean, you just now mentioned, you brought that up in a workshop with a lot of senior leaders. What's been your experience, in terms of how, especially more senior executives and slightly more formal industries actually respond to some of those activities?
Okay. Before I was hesitant, and I think even before I encountered accelerated learning because of Lego series play,
Mm,
that helped me. But now I'm more courageous and maybe more brave in saying the activities that you will go through are designed based on what we're trying to achieve. I mean, having
yeah.
discussion on psychological safety is a very serious matter, but it doesn't mean that the topic has to be serious. I mean,
Mm,
the way we do it, and the way I've probably uh, used this insights in accelerated learning is that um, I am there much earlier on than on the workshop day, which
yeah.
means I spend time with them, and so they get to know how I will do it. And so
Mm,
there's already a bit of buy-in rather than surprise them at the day workshop one, day one or day two. And it's like, why are we all like this? And
yeah.
with wearing hats and discovering our personality. So there's a bit of heavy lifting at the beginning, I
Mm,
think, and then this one then makes it easy for us during the delivery of the workshop. So for me,
yeah.
it's making sure that alignment is there at the beginning. And you know what? We're just really grown up kids.
Yeah.
So even if you say I'm serious, but the minute they see hands moving from
Yeah.
that other side of the table, they will go. But there will always be exception, but most of the time I think the operative word is that they're welcome to seeing, experiencing something new.
Mm,
But at the same time, if you are there with them, that things are being delivered according to
yeah.
what they've aligned with you, they will be your ambassador.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Well, I have a couple of other questions for you, but we'll go into those later to kind of then have a discussion between you and Tanya. So I'm going to remove your spotlight and now bring Tanya forward so that we can hear a little bit more about Tanya's journey and then kind of see what might be similar, very different, and then see what questions and thoughts that triggers from everyone. So, Tanya, over to you.
Can you see my screen?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So thank you, Darwin. I could see myself in very lot of things you said. And to answer your question, Melanie, I usually start the class or the training saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And very
Okay.
often people laugh. And so I kind of say no judgment, not telling anyone what's happened here. And so everyone feels like in a safe zone. And I can feel they are prepared to something different. Mm, mm. So they are more open. So just for our guest today, very often what people expect when going into training is something like this. At what time are we going to go for lunch? At what time is it going to end? Oh, I had other things to do. I have so much work to tend to. Why am I here? So to be honest, I used to facilitate my classes a bit like that before, with a few activities, but not so much. I was more in a mode of I need to give them the more information possible. They need to go out with as much as I can give them. And so indeed, I had decks of PowerPoints, decks of manual workbooks to take home with them. And we all know that with the workbooks, when we get home, we put them in a drawer and we never touch them again. So after AL, my trainings look more like this. So I had great fun looking at all the pictures to put them together. But what I try to put into action is more peer support, more exchange, more discussions between all the participants, because we all learn from each other. It's more of a co-creation mode. I also use all the senses, listening, hearing, writing, getting up and just going to a wall and writing something, or putting a post-it on the wall to make it more lively. And I usually do that after lunch, so people don't go to sleep. And something very fun and enjoyable, colorful environment. So as you can see, I put quite a few. I've also got other pictures there that I can share. Of course, if you've got questions about all this, I will happily respond to it. So for the people listening, it does look a bit childish, but as Darwin say, we are big kids, and having something different and just teaching and giving information in a different way makes that the learning sticks more. I don't know if you know this statistics, but we tend to forget 80% of what we're told or the conversation. And with this methodology, I notice that people keep more information and are able to put it into practice almost immediately. Okay. So how it started for me is, so I was facilitating some trainings for a training institute, and the managing director came back from a trip and said to me, I discovered a methodology, we absolutely need to use it, and you need to go to this training. Melanie's coming to Mauritius for 3 days and she's doing the training and you need to go. I know it usually happens like that. We usually force people to go to the trainings in companies, but I did go because being a trainer, I know there's always something to learn. And about 15 minutes down the road, down into the course, I knew I was in the right place. Melanie got us to walk around the room, look at quotes, and present ourselves in a different way than what we had already always done. So I went through the course, went through the certification, and I have been applying the principles ever since. Okay. What usually people say after the training, I just put a few examples, but can we come back tomorrow? It wasn't long enough. And that's for 2 days courses. Huh? I learned much more than I expected because I believe in the less is more. You just need to get the key messages across. And during the activities and during the exchanges with our peers, there are much more information that will come out. Okay. And of course, if needed, as a trainer, we will complete if there is information missing. What do I get as well? I've never been to a training that interesting, and that applies to any topic, even on boring topics. I did not want to come to the training, but now I will recommend it to all my colleagues. I hear that each and every time. So there is more engagement using this methodology. Okay. And if I come back on my AL journey, so I went through all the material to prepare the slides, and I found what I had used during my certification. You can see my action plan on the left, and I actually did respect everything I'd written on my action plan, which is cool. I was happy to read it this morning. Also, Darwin shared with you the blueprint in Excel format. I am a big fan of writing and post-its and just feeling. So I use the paper form of the blueprint, and I put a picture on the top right-hand side where you can see it. I have it actually next to my desk, and every time I need to design a course, I just go on it and design my course using the 8 principles. And also we have job aids, as you can see, that remind us of what we've learned. So I think it's very practical as a methodology, and it adapts to every person, every way of learning. The world is changing, and we can't do the same as what we were doing 20 or 30 years ago. The newer generation, they want to experiment, and I think this answers to that problem. And I just wanted to share. So that's what I was saying. Melanie, I'm sure you recognize this picture.
Don't make me hungry now. Don't make me hungry.
AL is not a one-dish meal. It's a table full of different experiences to get the correct message across. And that's also, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. I love, and maybe we can just kind of leave it, with that final image. I think this is, when I actually attended AL, this was one of my key insights as well. This entire aspect of very often we produce this one dish meal for our learners, meaning we come up with one idea of how this has to be taught, and we all have maybe our own preference. There are certain activities we love, certain ways of explaining something. And I think for me, what was a key learning going through accelerated learning was to challenge myself and actually experiment a lot more and say, hey, how can I teach this specific content in a different way? And actually provide the learner also with choice. I think this is, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that, how people have responded to that. I mean, there's a lot of train the trainer programs out there, a lot of instructional design programs, and AL is just one of, those many. But one very unique thing I have found in AL is that it's very, very learner centered and driven in such a way that it also believes in learner choice. So there's a lot of activities where you're giving the learner the choice of how to do it. Not always, of course. Sometimes you might have a very clear view, but for example, let's take the example of a treasure hunt. A treasure hunt where you have different questions. I've just done that recently for compliance training. Pretty boring topic, as many of you probably know. And instead of presenting all the stuff, I created this treasure hunt with different questions around compliance. And then across the room, I had information hidden, to find the answers. But knowing that not everyone is physically as active as I am and loves to dance around the room and, needs that physical movement, I had also made information available on the tables in different formats. And so I provided the learners with a choice. Your job is, the end goal is the treasure hunt. You got to find the answers to all these questions, but your choice to either walk around and hunt for it, sit on the table, your choice to do it alone or to maybe do it with others. And so I think this has, for me, been a very important learning as well, that I provide these choices for learners versus always dictating the one way. So just curious to hear your thoughts on how, what's been your experience with that approach? How do your learners respond to that? And how have you maybe made use of it in your own designs?
Yeah, I do the same. I don't do the treasure hunt because I've had a lot of resistance here in Mauritius. I think we're still culturally used to being spoon-fed the information.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of difficulties getting people up and walking around the room to go and look for the information. But I'll tell them, you've got the information in the workbook, or you can go on internet and look for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine because they're happy to be able to take their phones.
Yeah.
And I'll say the response is much more favorable with younger generations. I'd say people in their 50s, 60s, it's more difficult.
Yeah.
I can see Darwin smiling and saying, yes, I guess he's got the same problem. But yeah, I think people like being given the choice and they're not used to it.
Yeah.
So they do respond. They are very happy. And I think looking for the information gets them doing more effort and they'll stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love that. And curious to hear from you, Dan, but I love what you just said. It's again, you sometimes just have, and that's what one thing I love about AL, you have a basic activity idea, but
Yeah.
then you got to flexibly adjust it to your audience. As you said, you notice for whatever reason, people are not so comfortable walking around. Well, then do it maybe more in a sitting format.
Yeah.
A lot of the activities can easily be stretched and shortened, or large, smaller groups, competitive or non-competitive, again, just based on the
Yeah.
culture that you're
Yeah.
in. But thoughts from you, Darwin?
No, I like where you both went into that path of culturally being sensitive. I mean, the read of the room, I think, is
Mhm.
important when we're designing, and that's why I think I spend a bit more time than usual with the project stakeholders and who trying to understand who's going to be there. So that
Yeah.
I think I always defer to when I've encountered this with in accelerated learning, the passive active,
Yeah.
even the totality of how you design a 2-day workshop that is AL based, even if one set of activity is very active, and then you have another active, and then the cadence of the design is actually important in this.
Yeah.
Resonates well with this one dish meal and smorgasbord,
Yeah.
because you can have multiple or different set of activities, but you also have to look at it in terms of um, the demand
Yeah.
from the learners or the participants there. I mean, if I see like senior leaders, and then suddenly I'm going to do a very active activity, them jumping around and doing stuff, then maybe there's a pause after that. Then it becomes passive, and that rings true to me. That's why I always now look at the blueprint, because at the
Mhm.
tail end of it, this is where I can see where before I don't have this, consciousness of like, oh, is the cadence of the workshop going to be demanding physically
Yeah.
or not? But
Yeah.
with the blueprint, I was like, I need to pace it. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's what's resonating with this discussion a while ago.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. It's this aspect of, I mean, I always kind of call it, challenging our facilitation or designer bias.
Mm,
By kind of putting it into the AL blueprint, you get a very quick view. Are you making too much use of one type of activity? Let's say
yes.
you're constantly doing small group activities. Well, maybe at one point we all kind of get bored by doing everything in small
Yes.
groups. So sometimes you can do
Exactly.
large group, paired,
Mm,
small group, individual, have a healthy mix. Again, even I, as a physically very active person, if you get me to run around all day long, I'll be exhausted at one point. So having that cadence of physically active, physically passive, kind of finding a healthy mix. But then
mm,
also, different types of the senses, the way you stimulate them. I mean, I've seen a lot of programs overly relying on videos. And yeah, by sometimes videos can be a great way to get messages across. Well, I didn't really sign up to just do some binge watching on Netflix when I pay for a training. I can do that with yummy popcorn and beer at home. And so I think there again, to just understand that good learning and impactful learning comes from a smorgasbord, a rich buffet
yep.
of different experiences so that we can make sense of information in different ways. Yeah. So absolutely. So let me actually get a few questions from the audience
Sorry.
to you. So
Yeah.
those are all the activities, and of course, yeah, that is one of the great things I love about accelerated learning. We can show this afterwards. It
Yep.
comes, with a set of activity cards that can give you inspiration on how to actually turn content across. And one of the activity cards is the so-called genie wishes. And there's actually a
Yep.
question, Tanya, when you were presenting, I guess Vincent spotted some genie lamps on your wall.
Yep.
And I guess he was
Yeah.
wondering, can you explain what that activity is? What is a
Yeah.
genie doing in your room?
A lot of magic. So this activity is to ask the participants what are their wishes or expectations during the training.
Mm,
The idea is not to put people in a difficult state, because I'd say in a classic world, what you usually do is when you're presenting yourself, please tell me what you expect to learn. And
Yeah.
very often people are stressed, don't know if they're going to answer properly, don't have time to think about it, and don't want to sound idiot compared to their neighbor. So they'll often say the same thing as the neighbor. And this activity gives the time and the space to everyone to think of what are my expectations for this training, and then they don't have to put their names on it. It's an anonymous activity, so no one knows who's written what. And then they go and stick it on the wall, and during the breaks, us as facilitators, we can go and read and see if the content we've planned is relevant to the expectations. Okay, and then second step, at the end of the training, you ask everyone to go and collect their genie lamp and see if we've answered their questions or expectations, and if not, then it opens a space for discussion.
Love it. So what I love
Mm.
about it is a couple of things that we just explained it. First of all, I mean, I remember, I'm sure many of you do as well. Do you know that famous, start of a program where the facilitator, along with a flip chart, stands in the front of the room and says, "So, Darwin, Tanya, tell me, what are your expectations for today's session?" And then it's, of course, the facilitator writing it down. So it's very facilitator driven.
I
Whereas with
plead
this,
guilty. I used to do that.
yeah.
Yes.
And what I
Yes.
love about it, most of the time, what people say is this is going to be a highly engaging workshop, but then the first 20 minutes, it's all done by the facilitator.
Yeah.
And of course, also the facilitator starts editing what people are saying because sometimes it doesn't fit, you don't fully understand. Whereas here, straight away from the start, you get the learners involved. They write down in their own words. They have some movement because they get up, go to the wall, and put it up. So that's a big advantage. But what I love is what you said. I mean, again, how often do we collect expectations or wishes and then we actually don't go back to it? So then I actually do it. And so the beautiful thing is at the end to have people go look at their wish, look at whether it's been fulfilled, and reserve some time in case it hasn't to go back to it. Yeah, love that.
Indeed. Yep.
Yeah, wonderful. Tanya, can I ask you to take down your screen for a moment?
Sure.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, I don't know, Darwin, do you have the AL deck cards right in your hands? Because Vincent is actually asking, where do you get all these activity ideas from? So I know I don't have it with me.
I don't.
So can you tell me a little bit more about what that exactly is and how you're using these cards, which, by the
Yes.
way, are part of the certification program now. Anyone attending an AL course actually gets this set. So can
Yep.
you tell us a little bit more, Darwin?
I think this one references, not think, but I know because when we go through the certification process, right, we encounter the 8 principle. But I think what's important in the encounter and the 8 principle is the 4 phases of the accelerated learning principles, the preparation, okay, you have to help me, presentation, performance, and practice. I think I screwed it up. Oh, there you go. Brilliant. And so how these cards have been set up is activities are categorized according to those 4 P's that you're seeing right now in your screen. So preparation materials would be like this one, as Melanie mentioned, like learners post their wishes and goals, for example. And so for us who have been trained in accelerated learning and using this as a reference, I normally would now consult, like a deck of cards as a resource now in terms of like in the preparation phase of this design learning experience, what could I do? So those are the things that helps me with this one. And so having this ready and on standby, like on top of my desk right now, that's how I use it. And true to form, I mean, it's a jumping off point on things that helps you when you're defining or designing an activity. How about you, Tanya? I mean, you obviously have your cards also, but how do you use
I haven't. Errol hasn't
okay.
sent them to me yet.
They're on the way. They're on the way to Tanya. They're on the way.
Okay, there you go.
But
Caught Errol there.
sorry, Errol, it was an easy one.
Yeah.
No, yes, what I did during my certification is we had this little booklet during the certification that was collecting ideas for your programs.
Yes.
And we had access to reference books during the certification. So I did collect a few information from there, and I do use what I collected, but I also just think of simple activities that can fulfill what we're looking for. Example,
Exactly.
in one of my courses, I do a course called telephone etiquette, email etiquette, and professional conversation.
Mm.
And one of the modules is effective communication techniques. And before starting the module, I will give a drawing of something abstract to one of the participants, and I'll tell him, please, can you describe the picture? You can use any word you want, but please describe the pictures to all the other participants, and the other participants need to draw it. And at the end, we'll see if the results are the same as the initial picture. And just by doing simple exercises like that, they'll understand that we all speak differently, we all understand differently, and we all interpret what we're hearing. And that's just like how can I say, a dip of our toe in the pool for that
Yeah.
module. And it's a simple activity.
Yeah.
Mm.
So before we go a little bit deeper into some of the other activities, just for the benefit of those not yet as familiar with AL. So I pulled up the slide when you were talking, David, about the 4-phase cycle for optimal learning, which is a key element of the AL certification and design approach. So the entire idea is for learners to optimally learn, we got to make sure there's a preparation phase in our design where we think about how do we actually get the learners ready for the experience? How do we arouse their interest? How can we remove learning barriers? How can we boost their motivation to actually be there? How can we identify also their wishes, their expectations to make sure we create a relevant learning experience so that they come in an optimal kind of state of learning and not like what Tanya has shared, where people come in saying, when can I go home when it's lunch? And not really
Yes.
wanting to be there. From there, we then move into the presentation phase because, of course, in any training, there will be some new content, material, skills, knowledge that you want to get across. And so here is we want to think about how can we get that material across in the best possible way. So it's again relevant, enjoyable, interesting, engaging, multisensory. Then very crucial is the practice phase because we know without practice, well, it's probably just content consumption. And so this is really about thinking about how can we help learners integrate, incorporate, new ways, the new knowledge, the skills in a variety of ways. I mean, very typical things are role plays we can do there, case studies. And of course, the closer we get to simulating their actual work environment, the better, so that we can lay that foundation for the last phase performance. Because at the end of the day, hopefully the training was not only done for people to check a box, I've done training, but to actually go back and apply the learning. And so while part of the performance space, just like in preparation, has to happen outside the training room, already inside the training room, we want to start thinking about how can we support the learners in planning how to apply what they've learned back on the job. And so, I mean, when you look at it, I don't know how you feel, it seems very straightforward: preparation, presentation, practice, performance. Curious to know from your side, if you kind of reflect on the before and after AL journey you've been on, how has this 4-phase model been beneficial and instrumental to the way you design courses and also run them? Was there a certain phase that earlier you paid less attention to and now are doing a lot more of? What are some of your thoughts on this?
I'm gonna jump in, Tanya, on this one.
Go ahead.
I love the I love the provocation from Melanie on this one because I was actually looking at it this one the night ago when I was doing this. In fact, I think the before for me, I spent a lot of time on preparation and then the presentation, but I always miss out on the practice side of it. I guilty because I think when they've encountered the learning, my feeling at the onset or in the past was like, okay, done, we are okay. But actually, with when going through the certification, and this one was my aha moment. That's why I think AL seems very simple when you read it, but when you are experiencing AL, as a trained facilitator or maybe a new facilitator, and you say, hey, this is something new that I haven't encountered really, because you can read through it and you can just set aside. So for me, this was my guilty side, the practice. So now I'm more on incorporating a lot of this practice activities, which is sometimes bordering on the presentation also. When you get to see the activities, it's either a presentation or a practice, but to me it's that making sure that the learners and the participants are now able to practice what they just learned. That's my key thing with
Yeah.
AL.
Yeah. Similar for you, Tanya, or different thought?
So before AL, I was not doing any preparation with and for the learners. I was preparing my training, of course, but not arousing interest. I've got two topics. When it's a public training, arousing interest is a bit more difficult, but we do find ways. When it is in-house training, as you said, Darwin, I spend more time trying to understand who's going to be there, doing a buy-in exercise, maybe getting the management to do a video for the people they're sending into training to try and arouse interest. Of course, I was doing a lot of presentation, a bit of practice, but not as much as now, definitely not as much as now, and not as creative as now. We're doing a lot of role plays, of course. Yep. Now we're doing many different things. And for the performance, I wasn't doing anything. Now I've changed that. There's more support from peers, little reminders on regular basis. There's a buddy system. There are quite a lot of things that we try to put into place. Yeah. So there is definitely a before and after. Yeah.
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 Agree.
Yeah, I think, kind of just reflecting on a lot of the clients I've been working with on this, I would say I can see a lot of that there's a heavy focus on the presentation phase, because I think that's, people kind of feel that's what you are paid for, to kind of present that new skill. But again, less is more. Especially in today's age, you can consume a lot of the information yourself, but what you can't do alone is actually make sense of it and really practice it. And I think, it's what I love about the 4-phase cycle. It seems, of course, very logical. But again, reality sometimes is just different. It's training starts way before the actual day of training, not just for us as the trainer, but also for our learners. We want to make sure they actually, we know that from a lot of transfer research as well. If we want performance back on the job, we got to prepare our learners, make sure we understand their environment so we can create a relevant, engaging experience, but also put them into the right state of learning. Because if not, it's just kind of an uphill battle. And very often what I see is that, especially in the presentation phase, so that's a question for both of you. Very often when I get called in as well for design consulting work and I review content, I see people getting pretty creative in the preparation kind of phase, or then, as I said, use more activities in the practice. But when it comes to actually the new knowledge they want to get across, so the presentation phase, that's when I very often see people falling back to just PowerPoint. You kind of think presentation phase, lecture, PowerPoint. So I would just be very curious, do you have a favorite activity? Could be an AL activity, can be another activity, but something that you're using to add more engagement, more learner participation to the presentation phase, which very often I find is the hardest for people to ALify, make it more activity based.
I usually, if I can step in first, I usually tell them before I show you the answers and the PowerPoints, what would you be expecting to be on the PowerPoint? And I get them reflecting on, okay, for example, if I take my telephone etiquette course, what shouldn't we be doing? and I get them to work in little groups, and then they come back and they present themselves what they've decided should not be done. And then
Yeah.
after that, I would say, okay, well, maybe you've forgotten this thing, and I would give them additional info. Or if it's perfect, then I will say
Mhm.
perfect. You know it all already.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. So it's a little bit like which is another key concept. I remember Dave Mayer telling me that very often.
mm,
Trust your learners.
yeah,
Don't assume they don't know anything. Lead
yeah,
with trust. See what they know.
mm,
So and I mean that's also principle one of AL.
mm,
The AL
yeah,
trainer is more
Mm,
facilitator than
yeah,
presenter. So
presenter,
you
yeah,
agree.
facilitate, tap into what they know. If you
mm,
realize they don't know, then you put on your presenter hat
exactly.
and clarify. But I think
Mm,
way too often I observe people going in, and I think you said it before, Darwin, as well, as the sage on stage. We go in
Yeah.
with the presenter hat. We kind
mm,
of assume, I mean, sorry, the language, that our learners are dumb and we need to kind
mm,
of tell them everything. And then we wonder why they disconnect and disengage, because half of the
mm,
stuff we're presenting to them is actually not, they already know it. They can, what
yeah,
they really want to do is debate it, discuss it. Yeah.
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Darwin, any favorite kind of presentation activity you have?
You were just saying this. A good facilitator is a guy, and this was my card during the certification. A good
Yeah.
facilitator is a guide on the side, not
Mm,
a sage on the stage. And I firmly believe that. Even before I encountered AL, it's not so much what I know. I guess really, it's really the collective wisdom of what's inside
Yeah.
the room. And so, I guess you have to look at the sort of like the practice, which is service design and strategic foresight, very heavy on the domain. There
Mm,
is very little in the public workshop, but really when they approach me, it's very custom developed based on capacity development or skills development. So there's a lot of
mm,
like, hey, you're the expert, you teach us. But
yeah.
mm,
almost always at the beginning right now, and more amplified with accelerated learning, is that I need to harvest the wisdom first and try understand what is it that they know. And this is where I come in and probably guiding them in discovering, what is strategic foresight, for example, what are the methods and and the methods and the tools of strategic foresight, for example. But then now, rather than be doing PowerPoints, for example, which was my default to talk about a very deep topic like strategic foresight that they want to apply, this is where, when I was exposed with AI, you become a bit more creative with
Mm,
the presentation. In fact, Vincent a while ago was asking me what was my favorite card, for example. You know, if even at the very beginning, this was the card, the putting the genie. And I remember,
mm,
Melanie, in Manila, when you were up here, right? You were teasing me because I really love the genie, because it was I know it's a preparation, but it's a good segue into the presentation, because then it just
mm,
tells me what is it that they really want to dig deep into that one. And
yeah.
even in the virtual, sorry, just a very quick one, the virtual workshop that I was showing to you a while ago, I didn't ask, in this instance, this group of students on UX, for example, I didn't ask them um, no, I didn't tell them what I will do, but I asked them what is the thing that you want to understand in user experience. And so we
mm,
co-created the presentation, and I just guided them using the virtual board in trying to extract the information that they know and what they don't know, and that they were trying to understand more. And that's why I stepped in, but not so much now as a stage, but more of like, hey, in supplement to what you're trying to discover.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Well, I'm actually going to just quickly pull up one of my favorite ones, and I'm actually just kind of looking at it. And I'd be curious to know whether you've been using. I saw on Tanya's photo as some examples. One that I very much enjoy using is the so-called whole body learning approach.
mm,
So I think it should come, and we can see one example here of a photo where pretty much, especially, I mean, I think there's a lot of trainings where we teach processes. I mean, I
Yes.
remember so many different clients. I remember, one client in the Philippines about cacao farming, where there was an entire process that we had to teach people for the harvest process. How do you go about the harvest, but also how do you go about planting, the cacao seeds? But then, you go into an IT firm, you might have processes on, the systems. You go into a hotel, which of course you have quite a lot of, for example, in Mauritius as well, Tanya, and you're teaching people, let's say the check-in process. I think we have Prema on the call as well, who works in the airline industry. I remember developing a whole body learning experiences for teaching people the process of check-in, at an airline counter, like what are the right steps. And so again, instead of just boringly showing those steps on a slide, you kind of write them down on footsteps. And you actually then ask the participants, let's see whether you can actually put the process into the right order. So again, leading with trusting your learners, see whether they know the process. Now, of course, if they then get the process wrong, you can then correct it. But the entire thing about just visually and physically moving it around, you're so much more engaged in the process and more senses are stimulated to try and make sense of it than just seeing the process on a board or on a flip chart. So I think for me, and I know, of course, this requires a little bit of space. An adapted version is to just kind of make smaller steps and then people can do it on a table. But I have found, especially when it comes to teaching processes and steps, this is a great activity, especially for the presentation phase, to have learners discover the process on their own, and you just kind of supplement any information that's required. Have you ever tried any? Are you using any such activities in your programs?
Yeah, I am. But
I haven't used. Sorry, Tanya, go finish first.
no, go on.
No, I was gonna just quickly jump in and say I did a variation instead of the footsteps because they were trying to understand. I'm trying to find my photo here, trying to understand the phases of a strategic foresight. I had like instead of footstep where they normally encounter like octagons and what have you, and it's just making to connect those like a puzzle piece in what would be the ideal process of going through a strategic foresight. And that's a variation of that, but almost always that's what's fun with having the activity cards. Like you get to see the core structure and then you get creative and like how can it be like what Melanie was saying, process-oriented discussion or phases, then you borrow appropriate from the images that they're familiar with in the domain that, of course, we're sort of like talking. Sorry, Tanya.
No. I do it, but I haven't had the. I didn't cut the shapes in forms of footsteps. I just took different color papers. And it works fine, and they like it because you're engaging them. You get them to reflect during the exercise. They'll talk to each other and they'll say this step goes first, this step goes after, and then they'll discuss it, which creates more sharing. And then, as you say, you come afterwards and you say, okay, it's perfect, or why don't we try this step before this one and get everyone to think about it?
Yeah, and I mean, in the end of the day, you don't need footsteps. That's the fancy version. I sometimes, just the other day at the university, we were doing stakeholder management, and I realized, they need a little bit of movement. I literally just took Post-its. That's all I had available. And I just wrote down on Post-its the steps of stakeholder management, 5 versions, passed it out, and I got them to stand up and put it on the wall, what they think the steps in stakeholder management are. And what I think what's very cool about it as well is, and again, we don't just do this for people to have fun. I mean, at the end of the day, our goal is not fun. It's about understanding information, learning better. It's about boosting, people's confidence to get them ready to apply afterwards. I mean, we want to have more effective learning. And what I've noticed as well is because I'm not just passively consuming it, I'm involved in doing it. I then also notice where I made the mistake. Because when I just see it, I might think, oh yeah, logical, I know this. But when I'm actually the one doing it, I might actually realizing that, hey, no, I didn't get that right. And there is an additional version, that I added, especially when it comes afterwards to role plays. What I've realized, what kind of sometimes helps people as well. So I did that with one client on a role play on how to have following the steps in a difficult conversation. And they actually kind of walked through the role play, so the steps were on the floor. And then as they were role playing, they could see the steps. And that actually helped them do the role play a lot better because they had like a cheat sheet available.
Yep.
And so again, because it was visually available, that really kind of embedded some of the learning. Yeah. Good. So let's see. So I'm just going to see whether there are some questions. I, of course, always have some backup. We have about, we had a total of 90 minutes, so maybe just about 20 more minutes where we can kind of drill Tanya and Darwin on their AL experience. So Zainab is telling us, and Zainab, I love what you're saying. Very interesting. You're comforted in some practices I use when you're doing training. Absolutely. And I think both Tanya and Darwin can probably confirm that to you. What's lovely about ALE is there are certain things you will realize, hey, yes, I'm doing this already right. I'm having already some stuff that I'm doing correct, but then I get more ideas on what further to do. And so Zainab is actually wondering whether there's a specific methodology to choose the activities for a specific audience to drive towards performance and integration of learnings. So do you have a specific methodology that you choose to select which activity for which audience?
Oh my, it's a science and an art question, right? So I'm gonna lean, I don't know with Tanya or Melanie, but I'm gonna lean on the art side of this. I mean, intuitively, I think because I'm spending a bit of time with the stakeholders and the potential participants and understanding the profile, then that feeds into the activities that I would want to use for the workshop. Like for example, in my toolbox, Lego Serious Play, and then of course other stuff like Management 3.0 and all the stuff. And now I have this much more activities that I can reference in designing the overall experience. So you know what has happened? I have become method agnostic or activity agnostic. That's why I think for me, with accelerated learning is you really have to drill down on the learner or the participant that is going to be in that experience. So that's why I think there's the science is in the efficiency or the efficacy of the activities, but the art is in the choosing. And the art for me is we spending time with our stakeholders and our participants and trying to ensure that what we do, and don't go super active when you have 60-year-old CEOs or senior executives there, like, you might not get another invite for after that. But I guess that's my long-winded answer to that one. I'm gonna lean on the art sides,
Don't worry, I'll give the science answer after.
There you go. Go. Yeah, to balance it.
No. Let's see what Tanya thoughts from your side.
I would say it's a bit of both. But I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is sometimes we plan to do something and then the audience does not respond. And so I think the balance is keeping flexibility and just taking what we have and doing something different to try and get them triggered. Just as Melanie was saying, last week I held a training and the group was very passive. It was quite difficult for me to keep the energy up because they were very passive. They did not want to get up. And at one point, I just did not give them the choice. I just said, okay, get up, come with me. And I know you're going to say that's not very AL, but it was just a way of getting everyone back on track and listening. And so I just put this flip chart on the wall. I gave them a pen each and I just asked them questions and they went to write. Well, this is not an activity, I guess, in the card deck, but it was just what I thought at that moment, being creative. How can I get them back in the good energy and on track? And it was
Yeah.
fine. They got back on track.
Absolutely. I love
Mm,
that. I mean, I
mm,
think I would say as well, I mean, there's for me, so there's again, a lot of it is also in the moment. I think, with
yeah.
more experience. I mean, I was in the UK a couple of weeks ago
Mm,
with a client where we had a little bit too much to drink, especially the
mhm,
group the evening before, and they had to be back in the room at 8 in the morning. And when they came into the room, I could really see they were pretty dead.
mm, mm,
And so I was like, okay, now if I'm going to go even into role plays right now, it's just not going to work. And so while, I can see you, Zainab, that you're saying a dance to shake up attempts can help. Absolutely. However, one thing that I always try and keep in mind is, and it's kind of a key AL principle as well, I don't just like to do energizers to energize. I like to do them with a
Mm.
purpose.
mm,
And I think way too often we use energizers or icebreakers just for the heck of it, just to
Mm.
get
mm,
people to move. But actually, I mean, we are not, if we can combine it with some
mm,
learning, it's a
yeah.
lot more powerful. So what I did there is a walk and talk, because
Mm,
I realized, okay, these hungover, guys, they need a little walk. And so I said, okay, find a buddy, find a walking partner. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to go one round the block, the factory. And I'd like you to discuss two questions. And I gave them two questions about the content we had previously covered. And I just sent them on a walk. So it was, kind of movement. They went outside, they came back from the walk, and they looked so much better. Some of them even on the way stopped to grab a cup of coffee, but clearly afterwards they were ready. And so I think,
mm,
there's a lot of things I like to do as well, like energize, but I try and combine them with a purpose. Like there's another
mm,
one, and this is me. I used to be a swimmer. So I like swimming activities. I wonder, what do I do with them? Do I take them to the pool? No. I do this activity swimming with the shark, sometimes after lunch or when I realize people are really tired. And I get them to swim along the room and just kind of get some physical movement. And then I say shark attack. And let's say it's shark attack 4, then 4 people need to get together as a group to be safe from the shark. And then I give them a topic to discuss. So it's not only the movement, it's combined with a
Yeah.
reflection. And I think that's how we can make the learning also a lot more meaningful. To give you
mm,
now very quickly, a scientific scientific, yeah, a slightly more structured um, answer before, I'm just going to pull up part of the blueprint that Darwin and Tanya have been referencing. And so part of what, when we design using the AL principles, at one point, this is kind of the template I would use at one point for assessing my design. I'm kind of listing here the different activities I'm doing. And then for each activity, I'm asking myself, is this activity physically active or physically passive? Which
Mm.
senses does it stimulate? Does it involve the somatic
mm,
movement part? Does it involve kind of, listening, talking to each other? Does it involve seeing something? Does it involve heavy intellectual activity? What's the role of the trainer in this activity, in this piece of the program? Am I more of a presenter explaining? Am I more the facilitator, just giving instructions and debriefing? Which means, in which mode are my learners? Are they consumers, passively listening, or are they creators? And then I ask myself as well, in terms of collaboration, is this an individual activity, team partner, or whole class? And so then going back to the image of Tanya, the one dish meal versus the smorgasbord, I try and make sure I got a good balance.
Mm.
I got not too many, I have a good cadence, rotating between physically active, physically passive, including different senses, kind of, navigating between different types of collaboration, and then I might make adjustment. So to be honest, it's not so much about who my audience is, because all the AL activities kind of can work. So sometimes you just kind of need to try it out, but it's more about keeping in mind that I want to have a good balance and cadence of these different factors in my design. And so sometimes, because we all have biases, I might kind of realize that my design is too physically active. And then, I go back into my cards and look for an activity that's maybe a little bit more physically passive to give my learners a break. Or I realize, I have way too much individual activities. Let me maybe look for an activity that's more, team or small team partner oriented. Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of how I would look at it. So I'm just gonna try and see whether I missed any questions. Wonderful. Yeah, well, Prema, I'm very excited to meet you in Hong Kong. And we can maybe do the walk and talk right there as well together. Great. So we are kind of approaching the end. So we'll see whether more questions are coming in. But I for sure have one more question for you, Tanya and Darwin. I mean, both of you came with quite some experience already. It's not that you were completely new, because sometimes people also think, so why would I even go to an AL certification? Like, what's the benefit? And I mean, let's face it, there's so many train the trainer, train the designer programs available. And I would also agree, some of them, there's overlaps. I mean, it's not that this is the only program out there, but and I know especially you, Darwin, you've attended quite a few such programs.
Yeah.
What do you really feel, has been the difference in this? What makes AL stand out among some of the other approaches out there? What's really kind of unique? What have you maybe also really appreciated the most about this overall learning experience and how you've been able to use it in your practice?
Yeah. I think reflecting back on that question, I think when I encountered AL, it was in the periphery. I mean, you see in LinkedIn, I see Melanie in LinkedIn interacting with other co-facilitators, and then suddenly those words accelerated learning floating. And you're right. I mean, I would consider myself not a newbie facilitator, because I've been at it like 20 years in corporate and then 5 years on my own that is grounded on facilitation and practice. But I think I would reference it to most of the trainers are very specific to methods or tools and techniques, where when I encountered AL, and this was more of like reading through it, right? And yes, maybe that's how we would encounter a new methodology or a new technique. You read through it and it's like, this one I know it already, or it's familiar. That's why, maybe pass and just keep it in the cursory. But then I was intrigued with the simplicity of the message in accelerated learning. And sometimes, as a designer, wearing my designer hat, it's when it's simple, when it's really very complicated and very useful. And so I took the plunge and went through an accelerated learning certification course with not a high expectation. And in fact, I was and Errol and Melanie can attest to this, my expectation quote, because they would ask what is your expectation and what to get out of the certification. I was actually very critical. I was like, this might be a waste of money and whatever, right? You know what? 30 minutes, an hour into the certification course, like, that's why I said my reflection at this point was like I was coming home, because the things that I was expecting to learn was like, now it all makes sense. That's how I encountered accelerated learning. And I kept an open mind, and it has affected the practice, because now it's foundational. It's at the very core of the practice. The things that I'm doing right now for public workshops and in-house activities using this method and that, it stacks up against all of that accelerated learning principles in the 4 phases. If it's not there, then it's out. I mean, I am willing to let go of the things that I spend a bit of money on learning on this stuff. But if it's not aligned with this accelerated learning principles and phases, it's out of the door. And so that's how it has affected the practice. And I think one key takeaway that I wanted to share with you is the consistency, probably, that you apply these principles and these phases that's important. And I'm at that stage when I am trying to check myself whether I'm consistently applying the principle and practice, because I know it works for the learners and the participants.
Well, we just heard it took you 30 minutes to an hour. Tanya, you just shared before, after 15 minutes, I had won you over. So I'm wondering what I did differently in Mauritius. Maybe it was just a nice environment. One of the principles is a positive learning environment boosts learning.
Exactly.
And definitely going to Mauritius for training had a very positive impact on me. But Yeah, any thoughts from your side, Tanya? What you most appreciated? What I mean, I know I won you over after 15 minutes apparently, but I hope there were other moments later on. What did you appreciate the most about some of the things? Yeah, you took away. You're muted right now, so you would have to unmute again.
Yeah, I had not done any train the trainer or anything similar. So I just kind of became facilitator and tested things and tried to find my own structure. AL gave me that structure,
Mm,
really gave me the structure and the 4 phases that I had no idea of. I think in today's world, companies want results.
mm,
They don't want to send people off for training, pay a lot of money, waste time, and have no results. And in Mauritius, we've had this challenge. There is this challenge, and companies are really looking for results that we are getting with AL because,
yeah.
as we've been saying since the beginning, the learning sticks. And with all the phases, we equip the learners with practical things that they can put into practice in their daily work. So I
Mm,
really think if I had one takeaway, it's the structure, the simplicity, and the taking it back to the job.
mm, mm.
Mm, that
I appreciate
yeah.
especially the last thing you just said. And by the way, I didn't find yours, Darwin, but I did find yours, Tanya. Just want to
Mm,
kind of take you back in
mm.
time. Do you remember this?
Yeah,
This is you at the
yeah,
very end.
yeah. I
Yes.
saw it. I was looking through the photos earlier on. I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, this is what I would say as well. I think what I'm very proud of in having in this program as a little bit of, from my side is that, I mean, when I look at you, people leave at the end of 3 days with an actual design. So it's not just
Mm,
that there's a lot of things you learn. It's really we walk the talk and we kind of
mm,
we
mm,
also live by what we preach that yes,
mm,
there's some input, there's some principles we discover, but there's a lot of practice time. There's a lot of
mm,
time to go from practice to application and really working on your design. And
mm,
ideally, you leave with multiple activities that are designed to use in an upcoming workshop, or like in the case of you here, with a full blueprint, a full
mm,
workshop design that you can actually go
mm,
out. And we know again, that's so crucial for the performance phase. If people don't leave with a very concrete, tangible plan already of how they're going to implement what they've learned, a lot of transfer is going to be wasted. And I
yeah.
mean, I think a lot of you also who kind of see me on other webinars, you know how passionate I am about transfer.
Mm,
And this is also one of my key reasons why I feel ALMA is a very beautiful methodology, because it really starts building that bridge to transfer. It
mm,
starts as one of the few kind of instruction design programs to really get us to start thinking about that application back on the job and have
mm,
people really design and get their hands dirty during the workshop itself.
yeah,
Uh, so I just
definitely.
thought you might like this photo. So
Thank you.
little memories back.
Mm,
Great. So let me see, just making sure I didn't miss any. Well, yeah, thank you, Jason. Absolutely. It is. It is just, it's an old principle and, it's been around for a very long time. And just like anything that's old gets criticized quite a bit, just like other models that have been around, because everyone always thinks we have to reinvent the wheel, come up with something better. But I think, no matter for me, I did AL when I was already quite experienced in the job. And it just like you,
Mhm.
Darwin, it just made sense. The simplicity, the structure.
mm,
I love how I can use the ADL principles to really
mm,
evaluate myself. Am I actually creating the best possible learning environment? It's
mm,
not
Yeah.
only about thinking about what I love is that AL doesn't put the content in the focus. It doesn't matter what I
mm,
Mhm.
teach. It's about thinking about the learners and the environment as well, because we know the environment is so important of actually
mm,
supporting the learning and afterwards the application. So even just taking the environment into consideration, it just kind of gets me out. So often I find people so stuck to just models and content,
mm,
and yeah, that's a small piece of it. That mean, of course, every program has a piece of content that we will design around it,
Yeah.
but that shouldn't be the primary focus.
yeah.
So with that, we are kind of coming to an end. So I'm going to give one more, just for one quick minute, the word back to each of you. First, I just want to thank everyone who joined us today to listen in. I hope you enjoyed kind of hearing a little bit of the pretty colorful journey that Tanya and Darwin have been on. Hopefully, I always like to say it's really hard to talk about AL. You really got to experience it. But I hope
Yeah.
through the
Great.
stories of Tanya and Darwin and their photos, it kind of brought it a little bit more home. So, Tanya, Darwin, just final words from your side. Any message? I want to give you full choice in AL spirit, not
Okay.
dictate you what you should answer. Is there any final
Mm.
message you want to send to the audience?
After you, Darwin. Men first.
Oh.
Men first. Yeah, let's
Oh,
not, certain things we
till
don't
the end.
change.
Till the end. Yeah. I mean, this one I'm gonna invoke Nike and just do it. If you're on the fence with accelerated learning, I think for me, it was a revelation to discover at at the very tail end and very late stage in probably in my career and professional career, and just settle in nicely with accelerated learning, empowering this energized practice, regardless of whether it's design or strategic foresight. It's there. And I look forward to seeing you in Manila, in the Philippines, if you're coming to town. Tanya, after you.
Okay, well, I'll just share the card I got. I don't know if you'll see it, but I'll read it to you, that I got during my certification, that I chose, sorry. Experience is not the best teacher, it's the only teacher. So I think you
Yes.
need to experience the AL course to fully grasp the power of it.
I love it. And I love how you
Brilliant.
just corrected yourself. I didn't give you that card. You picked
Mm.
it.
You picked it.
Because again, learner just
Yes.
was like, did I force you to take out? Probably not.
No, no.
And you do remember there's this little thing. If you ever bump into me at an airport and you show me that card, I'll get you a drink. That's the deal,
Correct.
no? And then we'll have a
That's
Okay,
nice
why
I'll
AL
put it. I'll put
that's
it
why
in
conversation.
I
my bag.
always carry this.
There's a high chance of catching me in the next couple of weeks. I'll be flying quite a bit across the
Mm,
globe. So thank you so much, Tanya and
mm,
Darwin, for
mm,
being with us today. Really, really appreciate how you brought this alive. And of course, it really makes my heart, kind of skip a little bit, a few jumps
mm,
here, because, when I go and facilitate some of these train the trainer programs, certification programs, it's of course always with the hope and wish that people really use what they learn. And I
mm,
think hearing your stories and examples of how you put this into practice is just really beautiful. So thank you so much for giving me a nice boost of energy
mm.
today as well. And hopefully in the audience as well. So thank you everyone for joining us. We'll be staying around for a couple of more minutes. If you have questions, you can also find all of us on LinkedIn. If you kind of want to connect, you want to speak. And yes, in 25, we will be touring the world with quite a lot of different with AL stops across the globe. We are going to Hong Kong, we are going to Dubai, we are going to the Philippines, and of course Mauritius, Malaysia. So there's loads of programs coming up across the globe. So if you are interested, feel free to reach out. And by the way, just as a quick little last sales pitch, we also just sell the activity cards. If you feel, hey, I know a lot of this, but I could do with a little bit of inspiration on activities, we actually sell the cards as well. So you can always reach out to Errol. He is the man. He's guilty of not shipping them to Tanya, but I'm pretty sure he's going to do a better job shipping them to wherever you might be. So with that, thank you so much. Thank you again, Tanya and Darwin. And
Thank
of
you.
course, we will share the recording with you. Feel free to spread it if you think anyone else could benefit from it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye,